I bought over 15,000 apartments in the past 30 years, which is generating millions of dollars each and every month in cash flow. It's allowed me to pay no taxes legally and generate generational wealth. I'm going to share the top 7 lessons that everyone needs to know, whether you're buying your first rental property or you're a seasoned investor. The first one is no one tells the truth. Now, I think a lot of you guys know this to be true. But the seller, the broker, anybody who's trying to sell you something, their point, their goal is to sell it to you. They're working for tips, mostly. They're called commissions. So in every deal, every single time, you have to trust but verify. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean just looking at something on the internet or a piece of paper that somebody gives you. That actually means that you actually have to go out to the project. You have to look at all the books and records. You have to inspect everything, and you have to have people that can tell you what is going to be a cost later down the road. That process is called due diligence. And the reality is sometimes, not every time, the sellers almost never know what's going on their properties when they're listing it with somebody. The brokers typically do know. And of course, the broker is trying to sell the future, and you're trying to buy the past. So your goal is to buy the past, or your goal is to buy wholesale, and they're trying to sell retail. That's always going to be the game. That will never stop. And so your goal is to figure out where all the problems are, expose them, and pay the least amount that you can for the property. In the past, I've found units that were supposed to be occupied that were completely vacant, and the other way around. I've also found people that probably shouldn't have been living in the properties. And of course, there's never, ever, ever any time where the rent roll actually really matches the tenant's leases. They're almost always wrong, sometimes really wrong, but generally wrong. And of course, the leases are the contracts. They're the actual people that are going to be paying you. So you need to make sure that those are all verified and accurate. And then, of course, there's deferred maintenance and capital expenses. Those are things that somebody's going to have to pay. A couple of years ago, I had an older Ferrari, and I took it in just for an oil change. And of course, the guy said, I need to talk to you. He had a list of almost 50 grand of things that needed to be done on the car. So I, of course, decided just to trade that baby in. So this is exactly what happens with real estate. Obviously, a seller is not going to spend a tremendous amount of money on a property just before they get it listed. There's going to be a series of things that you have to check. I cannot tell you how many countless times we found major problems with the operating expenses and the deferred maintenance and the leases and the rent rolls and even the tenants that are living there. Almost every single time we're trying to find a property to purchase, we find these things. So when I say no one tells the truth, everybody's trying to cover their butt. Like the property manager's trying to cover their butt, the broker's trying to sell it for the most they can, and they're getting all this pressure from the seller. So those 3 people, they are not in your court. Your job is to punch through that, find out the truth, and then of course, when you buy it, you want to make sure that there are no surprises. Number 2 is the experience of the buyer. Of course, this is coming up right now because there's a lot of LPs that invested with people that don't really know how to own or manage real estate. What they do know is they know how to raise capital, and generally online. While it's true they can find a team to do things like manage the investors or manage the property itself, it doesn't mean that they know how to manage that team. So the experience of the buyer was paramount over the last couple of years. And this is precisely why my partner and I, Ross McAllister, hardly bought any assets at all. What was happening is people were raising capital very easily, but they didn't understand the fundamentals of what they were buying. And so they bought anyway. And so we had a series of passes throughout the last couple of years with our acquisition and our investment committee, which we hold every single Tuesday. We go over 2 to 3, 4 deals a week. And that's after they've all been vetted and underwritten. So in a given year, it's very normal for us to look at 100 or 200 deals and make maybe 20 or 30 offers. We have 30 years or 3 decades of experience, and we passed on almost every deal that we saw. So what does that say? to the people that bought during those periods of time? What does that say to the way the properties are operating during that period of time? Now, I don't have a crystal ball just like anybody else, but when you start to see people stretch and you're looking at the exact same numbers as somebody else, you realize what they're buying it at and what their returns are going to be. Because I have the exact same documents as the people that were purchasing over the last couple of years. So those people were hoping for two things: prices to go up, cap rates to stay stable, of course, the cash out refi. They were hoping that last year was going to be the same as the future year. I've been waiting for these times because when there's turmoil and there are problems and the assets are not performing and the LPs are unhappy and the lenders are unhappy and they're starting to foreclose and there's new money being raised, that's the time to get your capital together and start to look for really good assets. So if you're just buying your first single family, for example, just always make sure that it cash flows. Because what's killing people today is cash flow. It should cash flow in year one. It should cash flow in year 5. So the amount of equity that something you own may go up and down over time, but if it cash flows and you're a long-term holder, it doesn't matter. The people that are getting killed right now, like the people that own Airbnbs, they're banking a high occupancy and somebody that's going to be paying a high monthly rate to cover all their expenses, their debt, and all that stuff. And what's happened is the Airbnb market is pulled back, and now they're being exposed as well. But if you base your investment strategy on cash flow, you will never have that problem. This saved my butt in 2008, 9, and 10 because I always have bought that way, and we've never had a problem. And that's precisely why I didn't buy in the last couple of years, because people were overpaying and people were buying assets that weren't cash flowing in year 1 or 2, and they were going to make it up with some capital appreciation later, which of course, now we know the whole story never happened. If you want to see the 6 real estate opportunities that you're probably missing, check out this free PDF my team made for you. Number 3, financial analysis and underwriting. So how people interpret the numbers is also going to be based on their wisdom and their experience. So if somebody's looking at a set of data and they say we're going to have 8, 9, 10% rent growth because that's what it was last year, they're basically idiot. There's no way you can project those kinds of rents moving forward just because last year you may have got that. I have several examples, and I'll give you one. Ross and I sold a building in Houston, Texas. It was a building that was just producing marginal cash flow, and it wasn't enough return for us to keep the building long term. But before we did that, we said, let's see whether or not we can do a value add, which is literally just going into some of the units, which was built in the 90s, and upgrading them. That's all, just putting in granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, those kinds of things, and seeing if we can get higher rents. So we did that with 4 units, and we invested about $30,000 into those units. After about 3 or 4 months, we could see that the rents weren't moving at all, and the amount of work that we did in those 4 units was not producing any kind of return. So we stopped and we decided, let's just sell the building right now because the rents are at the market, and even improving them is not going to help the asset. So we listed the property with a big national company that you would recognize. And of course, they brought us a buyer. We went into escrow. Lo and behold, I'm on their investor list. I don't even know this company, but somehow I got on their investor list. So I got my own property from them, and they were the buyer asking me to invest with them. So now I get the opportunity to look at a business plan from somebody else on an asset that I own. So as you start to go down the list, what do I see? The current management company, which is me, is doing a horrible job, and we can raise rents $200, $300, $400. And of course, I already told you the story. We already tried that. The current management is overspending on the property, and we're going to be able to save on expenses in all of these areas. The story is you need to trust but verify. Anybody can put anything into any business plan. Maybe they got the information from somebody that showed that that could happen. Maybe they're just being deceptive because they're just trying to raise capital, or maybe they're just plain lazy and they haven't looked, which is probably the case. If they would have checked, they would have seen that there's literally no rent growth in this particular market. Those are just 2 things, but they're very important. They said income's going to go up and expenses are going to go down. Well, I can assure you guys, why don't you tell me, When is the last time you severely and meaningfully ever cut your personal expenses? Expenses are rising like crazy. Utilities are up, property taxes are up, insurance is up, labor's up, cost of goods are up, everything's up. So there's no possible way to cut expenses on anything that you're buying. There are some situations where that can be. That's one big red flag that you should be watching and just trust but verify to make sure that can actually happen. The other one is just fabricated income projections. So the income makes the net operating income go up, and the lowering of expenses makes it go up even more. So it makes the property look like it's worth significantly more than it really is. So when I talk about financial analysis, what it really means is looking at the actual expenses and actual income and tracking them into the budgeted projections, making sure that the actuals match the budgeted projections. This is where most amateurs slip up. So the way you would do it if you're buying your first rental would be simply to take a look at how much is the trash, how much is the water, how much is the electric, how much is the property tax, how much are the insurance, and these are all things that you can easily get from any seller at any time. On the income side, rents are driven by market conditions, not by what somebody thinks. It's super easy to survey a rental market and find out what the rates are. All you got to do is check with your realtors online. There's a number of people that know, including property managers, what the market rents are. So just make sure before you're buying something that you understand this, because if somebody's overinflating the income and showing the expenses to be less, you're going to not only pay more for a property, but you're probably not going to have the cash flow and the returns that you thought. Number 4 is the property management experience. So this is a huge mistake, guys. I'm telling you. So while the market's going up and rents are going up as a result, by the way, of the market, not necessarily anybody else, not because of superior management, people decide to take the property management in-house. And when they do that, they think it's as simple as just collecting rent and paying some expenses and cutting checks to the investors. As rents start to flatten, which is what's happening now, and you start to see concessions enter and you start to see expenses rise, that's when real true property management starts to emerge. And how do you see it? You see it as occupancy lowers. You see it if you are in a deal and the occupancies are in the 70s or the 80s, then you should be concerned. If you're in a deal where a syndicator or an owner is continually changing out the management company and always blaming somebody else, you should be concerned. If you're in a deal that's really, really well run from a property management standpoint, you should have high occupancy and managed expenses. Then the only thing you should be dealing with today would be cash flow. There's a reason why our company is 95% occupied for the whole company. That's over 9,000 units. It's a full-time job. I spend 70 to 80% of my time handling property management issues, trying to deliver the best returns we can for our investors. But I always get the question, how do you find a good property manager? I probably get that question almost every week. I'm telling you guys, trying to find a good property manager is the hardest part. I wish I had a straightforward answer for you, because you just never know. Sometimes you hire somebody and you think they're amazing, and then they don't perform to what your standards might be. So we've had that a number of times. But generally, with good management and good oversight, which is what we have, we can develop people into really good on-site property managers. I have a great story with this. I had an investor from San Diego, had a really nice building near the ocean. It's a small one. It's about 34 units. It was full. And all he did was hang out on a sailboat. And some broker decided to convince him to list it. So he listed it, and it immediately went into escrow, because who doesn't want a property like that? And then he, of course, did a 1031 tax-deferred exchange into another property in Phoenix, Arizona through the same company. So here was a guy that was sailing every day, had a beautiful life, and did a 1031 just to try to get a bigger property in Phoenix, Arizona. And the interesting thing is he called me the night before he closed. He called a property manager and said, "Can you come out and help me and take a look?" He had bought this whole property, rolled all this cash from a property that he had in San Diego into a property in Phoenix because it was bigger and larger. And so when I went to the property, I realized that there were about 100 property management problems. So right out of the bat, guess who he's upset with? Me. He's upset because I've said, look at your tenant profile. Look at all this deferred maintenance. Look at all these things. And all of a sudden, I put together a huge list of things that he needed to do that cost a lot of money. And of course, that didn't make him happy. And after about 90 to 120 days, I basically told him I didn't want to work with him anymore because he bought the thing basically sight unseen, called a property manager the night before, which he should have engaged while he was in due diligence. The broker laughed all the way to the bank. And I can't tell you how many times this happens, guys. I've been in the property management business since I was in college. And it's not untypical for somebody to call a property manager the night before, the week before something's supposed to close and to try to find somebody. This is not like finding a CPA to do your taxes. This is finding the right person that's going to help you make that property produce whatever it is that you're buying. So it's really important that you engage a property manager at the very beginning so they can verify the rents, the income, the expenses, and all the cash flow and all the things that your investment is based on. The fifth one is the communication with the debt and the equity, or let's call it the lender and the investors. This is a big deal. This is starting to show up now. When inflation started to run rampant and the Fed started to increase their interest rates, all of a sudden, cash flow started going down because the properties, of course, didn't change. What happened was the debt payments went up. So as debt payments go up, cash flow goes down. During that period of time, each property owner should be taking a look at their cash positions, their reserves, and their cash flow, and they should be doing forward projections. But because a lot of people are just syndicators, sponsors, or just money raisers and focus on assets under management, or AUM, they don't know what to look for. So what happens is the property managers that are experienced are actually calculating how much runway they have left with the cash that they have, but the inexperienced ones just run out of cash and run out of reserves. Most people have not been through this kind of a cycle, and this is when the loan documents start to come out. This is when the PPMs, or private placement memorandums, start to come out. This is when the sponsors have to raise more capital in the form of additional equity or perhaps a loan or just bring in some kind of rescue money. This is when the lender starts to look at all the covenants inside of the loan document and say, are you hitting your debt service coverages? Do you have your proper reserves? Are you in balance? There's a bunch of things inside of the loan documents that make sure that you're in balance. So the communication to your lenders and your investors are paramount. You need to let them know that you're in trouble. You need to let them know that you might need cash. You need to let them know that you might need to renegotiate or restructure. But you need to communicate to these folks and let them know what's going on because they are financially involved. This is a huge mistake that a lot of people are experiencing right now because there's a lot of people that believed that real estate is always supposed to go up and they're never going to have this problem. It hasn't. It's actually contracting right now. The lenders do not want these deals back. The investors do not want you to default. You have a fiduciary obligation to both to adequately communicate to them on what's going on with the asset. So if I had a duplex, for example, that was negatively cash flowing, the first things what I would hope is that you, number one, build up cash reserves like I talk about in all my videos, and two, you're cash flowing. If that is now negative, you have to take a look at, is it better to walk away from the equity and sell the property now, perhaps even writing a check to get out of it, or can you work it out with the bank? Because in many cases, the banks do not want the assets back, and they might kick the can down the road for you and give you a little bit of relief until the market corrects. But one thing you can't control, of course, is the amount of rent a tenant is going to pay because that's market driven. So if one of the units is vacant, then you have a huge problem. If you find yourself going to talk to a lender, you better make sure that your rents are at market, you have good tenants in there, and your expenses are managed, and that the only thing to discuss, the only thing that should be on the table is the debt itself. I want to emphasize that this is the time to look for opportunity. These problems that people are having that you may or may not even know about, a lot of the brokers know about, and certainly the people that own these assets know, this is the time to start learning, get your capital together, and start to look for assets, that you could acquire at below market rates from just 2 years ago. This takes us to number 6. You make money when you buy, not when you sell. So a lot of people focus on the buy low, sell high strategy, and I get that. I totally understand it. If you're in the stock market, that's what you have to do. In real estate, you make money when you buy. I just heard yesterday that somebody raised over $60 million to buy a very large project in Dallas, Texas. Now, the interesting thing is they don't live in Dallas, Texas. They don't own anything in Dallas, Texas. And they overpaid because I already own property there. I already know the property. I know the location. It's not a property I would buy. And they definitely overpaid by a lot. So how could that happen today? They're paying yesterday's prices instead of today's prices. Apartment values have gone down a lot because they're just raising capital. They don't understand that they overpaid. Here's the problem. Because they overpaid, they're going to have to stay in that asset a long, long, long time, perhaps never actually getting back to that value. Not only do you have to get to the value that they're paying, because that's going to take a fair amount of time, you want to actually make money on that. So this could be a 5 to 10 year hold. In that story, their exit is pushed way out because they're overpaying today. So you make the money when you buy. You have to buy with today's market with a plan to increase the value over time. Then when you exit, there should be some profit and capital gain. So some of my best deals I bought directly from banks, for example. These were broken deals that were owned by the banks. 50% occupied, 75% occupied, lots of deferred maintenance. They're problems, they're eyesores. There's things that you probably drive by and look at and go, who would ever live there? Those are the kinds of assets that you want. Then you go solve that problem for somebody. What you don't do is pay yesterday's prices for today, which is exactly what happened in that scenario that I just gave you. That person is going to be in that asset for a long time. All the equity and all the money that rolled into that asset is not going to get out for a very long time unless the market just takes a huge hockey stick up. That's the only way that that could happen. So that's why I say you make your money when you buy. You have to buy based on the fundamentals of the property and how it's running today, not just because you can raise money. And good deals are everywhere, guys. I'm telling you, like, these lenders are scrambling to find really good operators and really good sponsors to go fix their problems. They're everywhere. I just met with a broker last week that gave me numerous stories of numerous sponsors and numerous properties that are about to hit the market this year and next year that are in trouble right now and have run out of cash. And they're really located, great projects. The problem is that there's no equity left in those assets, and they're just basically worth the loan amount. So the people that bought those 2 years ago are still holding on because they believe that those values might go up. They, of course, have run out of cash or bringing in new cash to try to kick their can down the road in the hopes that the values will go up again. That's why it's so important to understand that you make your money when you buy. It's really important that you do not overpay. And number 7 is you should always know your exits. And this should always be with a business or a piece of real estate or whatever it is. So whenever you're investing in something, yes, it should be a long-term plan, but there should be some kind of a value add component. There should be some reason that you're investing in that. And there should be some fixed time frame, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Even managed money has a 3 to 5 year time frame. They have an in and they have an out, and you should too. You should always understand the fundamentals and the economics of buying something for market, because that's when you make your money, and growing it and then having some kind of an exit plan. And that can be an outright sale, or it can simply be a cash out refinance. There's no possible way that you're going to be able to project what the interest rates or the cap rates or even the property values are going to be in 3, 4, 5 years. But what you can do is you can buy something today for the value that it's worth. You can improve the value. It's called forced equity. And then, of course, you have something that is already worth more based on today's value. And then hopefully you also get some cap rate compression, some interest rates lower, and some values that can go up. And if that's the case, then of course you can do the cash out refis and things like that. But if it's not the case, you can always capitalize on that forced equity and sell the property later and scoop that and move on to the next deal. But in all cases, please make sure that that property cash flows during the entire time. The very last thing that you want to be in is a situation where you have negative cash flow. The point of owning real estate is for the cash flow and the tax benefits to wipe out that cash flow. That's the whole point. And you don't want to take the most important thing away, which is passive income or cash flow. That's the entire point of investing in real estate. It might surprise many of you, but when I buy a piece of real estate, I already know what the value is going to be in just a couple of years. So when I look at the rent roll, I look at the expenses, I look at the income, I look at the other income, I look at the value adds, I look at the CapEx, the things that I can do to grow the value in that asset. And it can come from so many ways. All of those things make its way into the business plan, and then the business plan is managed for that 2 or 3 year period, and we're growing the NOI steadily over that period of time based on our experience. Whenever we're buying anything, we always know what direction we're going to take it before we purchase it. I'll give you a couple examples. About 10 years ago, Ross and I started buying assets that had washer and dryer hookups as an example. They had the washer and dryer hookups in there, but no washers and dryers. The tenants would simply go down to the local laundromat, or if there's a laundromat at the property, they would go down there and use their coins and wash their clothes. That's a bit of an inconvenience for the residents. So we had a strategy where we were just buying sets of washers and dryers. We probably bought thousands of these, thousands and thousands of sets of washers and dryers. So whenever we'd find a 200 or 300 unit property with a laundry room or hookups, we were always excited because we knew that we could buy a set of washers and dryers and we could charge the tenants an extra $50 a month for the use of those. So they had about a 1 year to a 1.5 year payback. So after about year 2, they were completely paid for. Basically, the tenant financed them. I bought them up front, put them in all the units, but the tenants paid me back at $50 a month per washer and dryer over a period of time, and they got paid off. And all of that makes its way to the value add of the asset itself. It makes the property worth a lot more money. So these are the kinds of things that you can do before you buy an asset. Real estate is mostly about what you see. And the only way to see it is actually to be around people that have done it a long time. And it certainly isn't just because somebody can raise a bunch of money online. There's one mistake in particular that has helped me develop my business model today. And I swore to myself I would never make it again. I'll bet a lot of you guys are doing that right now. So if you want to learn what I've messed up in the past, check out this video here.